We as consumers need to be prepared to pay higher prices for the products that we wear. Perhaps we should wear fewer, right? And not buy as many. But at some point, we need to curtail what is going on in this production system. One of the prescriptions that has been coming up following the Rana Plaza disaster has been that we monitor or scrutinize our suppliers more closely. Now, I have done a lot of field work in developing countries such as Pakistan, for example, which is a major source of textile products. And yes, almost all big buyers have auditors going into those firms and so on. But what also happens is that many of those firms have one unit which can be audited, and which is really quite clean, which has which looks pretty nice and so on. But lots of other units which may be wholly owned or which may be subcontracted out to, and which don't quite fit that profile. So there are ways of getting around those audits. But what we really need to get into is the core dynamic, in the global textile production system, which is that Western economies have been slowing down. There is greater and greater pressure on the consumer's wallet, and they have been transferring this pressure on to clothing retail chains, and who are forced to bring prices lower. So, Primark is just one name that is mentioned, and, but there are many others. Now, that means that pressure gets transferred on to the suppliers or the manufacturers in developing countries. Now, the factory owner there has a lot of pressure, conveys that pressure on to the workers. Now, those workers, of course, in conditions of high unemployment, for example, have very little choice. And so they are working in shabbier conditions for much less, and it's inevitable that we see these disasters. It's a systemic problem. The problem is that, in the context of globalization, barriers are coming down, tariffs are coming down, and, there is greater and greater trade. There used to be a time that the textile trade was regulated, at least all the exports to the United States, which is the biggest textile market, were regulated by a quota system. In 2005, that quota system disappeared. And it was really after 2005, that true globalization took place, true trade deregulation took place in the textile sector. And it was after 2005 that we saw, sort of an increasing number of industrial disasters, which means that, there was more and more pressure now on the workers and on the people who owned the textile factories, because if they wanted to stay in the game, they had to lower their costs. Of course, the other problem is that, one solution is that you can always increase your capabilities, develop more capabilities, and move up the value chain. But in a number of those countries, that requisite investment in human resources is not present. So the only way out for a lot of these guys to survive or to stay in the game is by lowering costs further and further. And what you see then is, what you read in the newspapers. The first reaction from the Bangladeshi government after this disaster was just completely isolate this as a one-off, thing. Because they know that Bangladesh gets most of its export revenue from textiles. So they don't want to shut the industry down, right? So they want to basically suggest to you that, this was a one-off thing. This was, the person who owned the factory was responsible. Let's hold him responsible. Let's prosecute him, and so on and so forth. But what I am pointing out is that this is a systemic problem, and it goes beyond that one individual. It goes beyond Bangladesh. It goes to all the countries who are involved in this particular trade. So yes, there are some measures that are being taken, but in my view, not enough. Women, who are also known as the Reserve Army of Labor, are being inducted into the textile industry, especially in a stitching role. Now, what is interesting is that a lot of it is being publicized as, empowerment, emancipation, and so on. But it has a very clear economic dimension as well, which is that prior to these women coming into these stitching roles in, let's say, textile factories, men were doing the job, and men were doing the job in a slightly different way because they worked on piece rate, which means that you're paid per piece that you stitch. Women are not coming in on piece rate. Piece rate, of course, affords a lot of flexibility to the worker because they can work for you, and in lean times, they go off and work somewhere else. Plus, they do not have to follow certain timings in the factory. They can come and finish the work, by the evening, and that's all you want, as long as they do the work. Now, men, because of all this flexibility and because they were sometimes working for multiple factories, they earned up to about 15,000 rupees a month in Pakistan. Women are working on minimum wage, which is close to 8,000 rupees a month. So overall, the income to the household, provided the man has not found something extremely lucrative, and given the economic conditions there, that's not really a big possibility. The overall income seems to have gone down.